The Early Bird. Engines on the island of Sodor work night and day, delivering goods and passengers to and from different parts of the island. However, there is one job that is very different from all the late night deliveries on the island, that being the mail train. Percy is the engine that takes mail to and from different stations throughout the island. Percy loves this job, as Percy was on his way to Knapford Station to drop off some packages. He didn't want to be late. That was when, one bright spring morning at Timothy's sheds, Sir Topham Hatt came to see Thomas. He had important news to tell him. "Ah, Thomas," said Sir Topham Hatt proudly, "just the engine I was looking for. I have very important news to tell you. Percy's valve burst, and there is no other engine available to pull the mail train tonight. I was wondering, Thomas, would you be up to pull the mail train tonight?" Sir Topham Hatt said proudly to Thomas. Thomas was very excited. He hadn't pulled the mail train in a very long time. "Oh, yes, sir! I would love to pull the mail train, sir. And I just feel really bad that Percy's valve burst, but if it's to help a friend, I will pull the mail train for him tonight, sir," Thomas said to Sir Topham Hatt. "Well, it's settled then," said Sir Topham Hatt. And with that, Sir Topham Hatt left. Emily, who had been overhearing about Thomas taking the mail train, was a little concerned for her friend. Thomas, are you sure you can pull the mail train tonight? Percy and Duck have told me it is a very lengthy job, and that you're pretty much delivering mail all night until the morning," Emily said to Thomas. Thomas looked at his best friend Emily. Then he smiled. "Oh, Emily, I'll be fine. I've pulled the mail train before. I can handle this easily," said Thomas to Emily. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Emily, I have some jobs to do before I take the mail train tonight," said Thomas. And with that, Thomas left. Then, that's when later on that late afternoon, Thomas was making his way to the coachyard to collect Annie and Clarabelle. He was stopped at a red signal where he saw Spencer. "Hey, Spencer," Thomas said cheekily, "I'm going to be pulling the mail train tonight," Thomas said cheekily to Spencer. Spencer was surprised. He had heard all about taking the mail train and how up late an engine is when pulling it. "Thomas, are you sure you can manage this?" said Spencer to Thomas. Thomas looked at Spencer. "Oh, Spencer, I'll be fine," said Thomas to Spencer. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Spencer, I have to go and take my coaches," said Thomas, as Thomas puffed away. Throughout the day, Thomas worked all day on his branch line. He was on his way to take Annie and Clarabelle to Farquhar Station. He didn't want to be late. At the end of a long and hard day's work, Thomas had picked up the mail vans from the yard and was making his way to see Percy to ask him about the different stations to drop off the mail. He didn't want to be late. Soon, that's when later on that night, Thomas came to see his best friend Percy at the works. Percy was still being repaired. His valve wasn't fully fixed. Percy was glad to see his best friend Thomas, and was most surprised to see him with the mail train. "Oh, Thomas," said Percy excitedly, "I'm glad to see that you're helping me out, but just to double check, do you know which stations to drop off the mail at?" Percy asked his best friend. Thomas looked at his best friend Percy, and he smiled. "Oh, Percy, you and me have done this job before. Trust me, I know where all the different letters and packages go. Don't worry, Percy, I won't let you down. And a promise is a promise, Thomas said to his best friend Percy. Percy smiled at his friend Thomas. "Oh, thank you, Thomas," said Percy to Thomas. Thomas looked at his best friend Percy again. "Well, Percy, I like to stay and chat all night, but I'm going to be up all night delivering the mail. So I'll see you in the morning," said Thomas. And with that, Thomas left with the mail train. "Bye, Thomas," said Percy, "and good luck," Percy added. Throughout the night, Thomas began dropping off the mail at different stations throughout the island. Thomas's first stop was Wellsworth Station. Soon, Thomas arrived at Wellsworth Station just on time. The station master was very impressed with Thomas. "Thomas, the mail has arrived here on time," he said. And soon, the workmen began unloading the different packages and the different letters. Thomas smiled. "Oh, no problem, sir," Thomas said. Soon after all the letters and packages were delivered at Wellsworth Station, Thomas's next stop was Farquhar. As soon, Thomas began to chuff on his way to Farquhar Station. He didn't want to be late. Then, Thomas's next stop was Farquhar. Thomas arrived at Farquhar Station on time to drop off the second to last batch of letters and packages before heading back to Tim's sheds to rest. Soon, all the letters and the packages were unloaded from the vans in Thomas's train. That's when the guard blew his whistle as Thomas chuffed on his way to drop off the last batch of letters at Knapford Station. After dropping off the last bit of the letters at Knapford Station, the sun began to rise across the island. Thomas smiled from buffer to buffer. He was glad that he had helped his friend out. "I did it," Thomas said. "I delivered the mail at different parts of the island. Time to see Percy at the works and tell him all about it," Thomas said, as Thomas chuffed on his way to drop off the mail vans and to see his best friend Percy. And so, after Thomas had dropped off the last of the letters and packages at Knapford Station, as well as dropping off the mail vans in the yard, he had come back at the works to see his best friend Percy to tell him the news. Thomas plucked up courage. "Well, Percy," Thomas said, "all the mail has been delivered, and they all arrived on time," Thomas said to his best friend Percy. Percy smiled from buffer to buffer. "Oh, Thomas, thank you so much. This really means a lot to me that you helped drop off all the different letters to their different stations while I was being repaired. Thank you so much, Thomas," said Percy to Thomas. Thomas looked at his best friend. "Oh, no problem, Percy. What are friends for?" said Thomas to Percy. Before Percy could say anything, Thomas had fallen fast asleep. Percy smiled, though, and was glad that his best friend Thomas had helped him out with the mail. In the end, Thomas was really glad that he had helped out Percy take the mail for him, and was a very good friend indeed. Do you think Thomas is going to pull the mail train again? That's another story.